4 years of college, became a Berkeley policeman, and being in Berkeley, Joan and I went down and took sailing lessons at Aquatic Park in El Toros, and that was really fun. I liked sailing. It was interesting to me that you could adjust the sail, and no matter which way the wind was going, you could go more or less where you wanted to go. And while we were still in school there on El Toros, I bought a Lido 14, and Sears was having a sale. If you bought a boat and a trailer, you got a free motor, and that was a bargain. I think they had in mind that you would get a great big racing boat and a huge trailer and a big motor. The whole thing didn't cost me $2,000, as I recall. And with the Lido 14, we started racing at Lake Merritt. The Lake Merritt Yacht Club had races every weekend. And I enjoyed that a lot. And I found what I thought was a secret with the lake. Had kind of a Y shape. And if the wind was coming one way, it would split and go two ways. And I found that if you were coming up, you could go on a broader reach by following that side of the course. And so I did pretty well. That was 1958 to 1961. But leaving Berkeley Police, I went into the FBI. I was stationed in Washington, D.C. on the Potomac River. They had the Potomac River Racing Association. And so I bought an albacore. And the albacore was almost identical to the Lido 14. And that was fun. So we raced there for many years. And I do know that you race there. The girls raced, you raced, Granny raced. But at that time, the river was foul. The Potomac River was turds and condoms floating as we raced along. That wasn't pleasant. But the racing was fun. But I found that some guys were just natural sailors. Try as I may, I could never consistently be in front of the fleet. They had what they called A group and B group. If you were in the B group and won a certain amount of races, then they put you in the A group. And if you were in the A group and lost a certain amount, they put you back in the B group. Well, I went back and forth. I never was at the top of the A group. And I have one vivid memory. There was one guy, I forget his name, but he was always number one. And for some reason, I'm up with him. And we're sailing along, and his main sheet breaks. So he immediately loses control. So he stands up, grabs the broken sheet, and standing there, and he's repairing it, and all the while keeping up with me. He sailed as fast as I was capable of doing. And in the meantime, he's standing up in the boat and repairing the sheet. And that was a real lesson for me. I thought, I'm never going to be that good. I forget what the secret was. Eventually, we got transferred to Puerto Rico. Another agent and I, Jimmy Blassingame, bought an aluminum outboard with a trailer. And we would boat a little bit, but we soon sold that. The head of the office had an El Toro sailboat, and he got transferred, so he wanted to sell his sailboat, and I wanted it. So I went to him, and I says, what was his name? Wally Estel. I says, Wally, I'd like to buy your boat, but I can't afford very much. I'll give you $100 for it. And he says, I'll take 50. I thought, that's a real gentleman. So At that point now, I've owned the Lido, the Albacore, the aluminum runabout, and an El Toro. And I sold the El Toro before we left Puerto Rico. Getting back to Alexandria, Virginia, being stationed in Washington, D.C., I bought a Pearson Ariel. It's a classic design sloop, 26 feet, fiberglass construction, a nice boat. It was really a lovely, lovely boat. And we ended up owning that for 15 years. Sailed on the Potomac, sailed on the Chesapeake, did a lot of nice sailing. The East Coast, though, isn't great for sailing because in the summer there's no wind, and in the winter it's too cold. And so you just have a couple of short windows of great sailing. So we bought the Ariel before our assignment to Miami. Well, but that was near the end of my career. I only had 3 or 4 years after Miami until I retired. So that was somewhat near the end of my career. Yeah, we sailed it down the Intercoastal Waterway to Miami. Ended up buying a house that had a boat dock on the channel right in our backyard. Had some wonderful sails to Bimini and back. Then sailed it back. I was on the trip down, but you were on the trip back. And we kept the Pearson Ariel, named Snow Goose, until my retirement. And 1 or 2 months before retirement, we bought a Morgan Out Island 41, a 41-foot sloop, fiberglass, great boat. I see one down here at the Berkeley Marina now, and I'm amazed at how big it is. We had a big boat. And our plan was, I took the earliest possible retirement. In those days, the law was FBI agents had to retire between age 50 and 55. So I retired within weeks of my 50th birthday. And we had sold our house, moved on to the Morgan Island 41, named Dos Olas. Dos Olas, well, we picked the name because it has 2 meanings. In one meaning, it could mean 2 waves, the wave of government service and then the wave of boating, living on the boat. But it also could mean 2 hellos. And so we use that as a greeting. Olas, or dos olas. And that could probably be another whole session, our 2 years on Dos Olas, because we had lots of wonderful, we've told some of the stories already. We went on a cruise while we were assigned to Miami. We took a cruise ship to the Bahamas. I remember Janine was with us. I think she was the only one with us. And I also remember that computer games had just come out, and on the ship they had the game where you shoot. Your ship goes back and forth and you shoot at targets coming down. That was the first computer game I remember. After Dos Olas, we bought a Pearson Vanguard. It was very, very similar to the Pearson Ariel, but it was, I think it was 6 feet longer. It was 32 feet. And we were going to go on another sailing adventure. But just 1 or 2 days, we're still going south on the Potomac. The water tank blew. I was filling the water tank, and I didn't realize it. I was building a pressure inside, and so the water tank seam split. And as if that wasn't it, then the engine stopped running. And we pulled into the nearest pier It was some fisherman's boat. And I tied up and it says, I'm in trouble. My engine isn't running. And he says, well, what's the matter? I says, I don't know. I'm not a mechanic. He said, let me take a look at it. So he went down and it was a difficult access. But he says, oh, yeah, you've blown a gasket. And I says, well, how do I get that fixed? He says, I think I can fix it. He says, I don't have any gasket material. So he went and got one of his kids' toys, a plastic toy, and he cut it out and he made that the gasket. But because of the water tank and because of the partial repair to our engine, we went back home and called that trip off. And that boat didn't get much use at all, because shortly after that, we moved to Colorado and had to leave the boat behind. And after a year or so, we finally sold that boat. But it does count as another boat ownership, and we intended to go on a long cruise. But after having moved to Colorado, Granny and I went on several cruise ships. We took a cruise ship through the Mediterranean, got as far as Istanbul, toured Italy, Greece. The ship stopped at Ephesus. Ephesus was an ancient Greek city that was still in interesting condition. But the surprise was, we're walking along Ephesus and I see a guy who says, "You're Jim Price." He was a guy I worked with in the FBI. But Granny and I have had numerous cruises, a couple to Hawaii, one to the South Pacific, one from San Francisco to New Zealand, and we're planning to take another one. If our health holds up, we're going to take another one. The cruise from San Francisco to Sydney is 22 days, and 22 days might be the maximum we can go without being near a doctor. But we've spent a lot of time on the water. The ferry boat here in the San Francisco Bay we've taken numerous times. One day we took Bart to Jack London Square in Oakland, took the ferry boat to San Francisco, changed ferry boats, took the ferry boat to Up Bay, and took the bus back home. So we made a complete circumnavigation of the bay on public transportation. But it just shows our interest on being on the water.